If you're like me, you don't like to upgrade your technology like your laptops or phones every single year, because most of the time it's a pretty small performance boost. When I saw the new M1 Max come out, one of my first questions was, could this replace my 4-year-old MacBook Pro? And in this video, I have both of my machines, a 4-year-old 15-inch MacBook Pro, as well as the brand new MacBook Air. And I'm gonna be putting them head to head in a variety of real world and benchmark tests to see if this new MacBook Air crushes my MacBook Pro. Just so we're all on the same page, this MacBook Pro that I'm comparing the new baseline M1 Macbook Air to is a 2016 MacBook Pro 15-inch, and it's the baseline. In fact, I believe when it was brand new, it was $2,400, so it was pretty pricey. The first one we're gonna test is Geekbench, and it'll give us the overall idea of how powerful the CPUs in both of these guys are. 3, 2, 1, and go. Now we're just about 30 seconds into this benchmark, and it's pretty clear. The Air is clearly pulling ahead of the Pro. And the Air just finished. Now the Air finished a while ago, but the Pro is still chugging. It's taking a minute. Okay, wow. This is quite a difference. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but let's look at the results. On the Air, we have a score of 1,729 for single core and 7,594 for multi-core, which is just a great score. But then on the Pro, we have a single core of 817 and a multi-core of 3290. I mean, check that out. That's quite a difference. This is literally double the power of this one. And again, this one's from 4 years ago. I be honest, I kind of expected it to be a little more than double, but still, double's pretty good. Okay, next up is Cinebench. This again is going to push these CPUs to their limits. Let's see how they do. Okay, and starting in 3, 2, 1, go. And immediately, this Air is almost done with its image, or at least it's getting pretty close. And it seems like this Pro has barely even started, and I'm hearing those fans kick up. Okay, wow. You can really hear those fans going right now. It sounds like this MacBook Pro is about to blast into space. I mean, it feels a little warm to the touch. It's not bad at all. And if you don't know, the MacBook Air doesn't have any fans, which seems kind of weird to call it the MacBook Air. It's more like the MacBook No Air, but whatever. Interesting results again, not quite double the power this time. So on the Pro, we're sitting at 4,153 points. And on the Air, 6,603 points. So for Cinebench, it wasn't as mind-blowing. It was about 60% more powerful, but still pretty good. Now let's do a benchmark for graphics. My MacBook Air here has a 7-core GPU, whereas the MacBook Pro has an AMD Radeon dedicated graphics card. So it'll be really interesting to see what the results are there. Okay, these two are both off and running, but I want to note that the Unigine benchmark actually isn't designed to work on the M1 chip in the MacBook Air here. So what it's having to do is some type of emulation to get the benchmark working, and as you can see, it is indeed working, but you might see a little bit of performance hit based on doing emulation. But what's interesting is the results are pretty telling. Right here, you can see that it's sitting at about 65 frames per second, whereas the Pro is sitting at about 38 to 48 frames per second. Okay, these scores are in, and again, pretty interesting results. The Pro got, for frames per second, 44.6 and a score of 1,123. But then the Air did quite a bit better with a frames per second of 70.4 and a score of 1,773. Now, so what we're seeing is somewhere between 60 and 100% more better performance on the new MacBook Air. Now, benchmarks are great for knowing the absolute performance differences between these two machines, but one thing it doesn't tell me is how much this extra performance of 60 to 100% is going to actually make a difference in me editing or doing Photoshop or something like that. So let's actually do some real world tests and see if there is a noticeable difference when it comes to the performance between these two machines. So first off, let's try Final Cut on both of these. I have a bunch of clips that are imported. They're the same clips. They were shot on my GH5 at 4K 60 frames per second. So let's see how they do. So let's just test the speed of just selecting in and out points. So in, out, drag to the timeline. Let's go to the next clip. In, out, drag to the timeline. Let's do 3 more. How about that? In, out, drag to the timeline. In, out, drag to the timeline. Let's do 1 more, and out, drag to the timeline. that was pretty good. Okay, so let's do the Air now. So in, out, drag the timeline. In, out, drag to the timeline. In, out, drag to the timeline. In, out, drag to the timeline. In, out, drag the timeline. I'm just kind of scrolling over the timeline. It's doing a pretty good job of keeping with me. Could be smoother. Okay, now on the Air, that feels pretty good. Yeah, that's not bad at all. I wouldn't say that there was a winner in that. Okay, well on the Pro, let's do some light coloring to see how it does. I'm gonna add my little LUT here. It's called Garberville, one of my favorite LUTs. And it just kind of makes the footage look nice. And let me kind of fix the exposure some. I'm gonna bring down the shadows, bring up the highlights. That looks pretty good. I'll do a color curve on top of that. It's like an S curve just to kind of bring down shadows and crush them a little bit. That looks pretty solid and it did it really well. Okay, now let's do the same thing on the Air. I'm just going to apply that LUT. Looks good to me. Let me bring down the brightness, or bring down the shadows, I should say. Bring up the highlights to the edge there. Looking good. I'm gonna bring that one up just a little bit. Let's do another curve. Just do an S curve to make it look a little more contrasty. And that looks good, and again, performed perfectionate. Now I am gonna throw down this little transition right here just to see how it performs, and I'm just gonna play, and let's see how it does. It's a little choppy, but you can at least get the idea. Now moving back to the Air, I'm gonna try the exact same transition, and let's just see if it'll play. I think it was a little smoother, but still a little choppy, but at least you get the idea. Okay, now I have a 5-minute project open. Again, this is all footage shot on my GH5, 4K, 60 frames per second. All of this footage is color graded and has a LUT applied in Final Cut. So let's just see how smooth it is. That's not bad at all. I mean, it could be smoother, but it's pretty good. Let's try a zoom test as well. Okay, zooming, a little delayed, but it's not bad. Okay, again, same footage, same LUTs, all that stuff. And again, pretty smooth. I don't know if it's better or worse, but I think it feels about the same to me. Let's try a zooming test. And I think the zooming is a little bit smoother though. That feels pretty nice. Now let's see how long each of these take to render out these 4K 60 frames per second timelines. Each of them are color graded and have LUTs. I also threw in 3 transitions just to kind of push the graphics a little bit. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, we are a minute in, and this is a bit of a surprise here. The Pro is sitting at 17% now, and the Air is lagging behind a little bit at about 14%. It's neck and neck. It looks like the Air has actually taken the lead just slightly, and it has made up the gap. Wow, 8.5 minutes in, and this is just bizarre. They are neck and neck. There are times where the Pro is pulling ahead, and there's times when the Air is pulling ahead. And right now the Pro has a slight lead. In about 9 minutes and 10 seconds, the Pro is done. Wow, interesting. And about 10, 13 seconds, something like that later, the Air is done. Okay, wow, that was interesting. I did not expect to see that in terms of Final Cut. The performance was pretty similar between both of them, and the rendering was slightly faster on the MacBook Pro. Now, I will mention that if you did, instead of getting the MacBook Air, got the MacBook Pro with the M1 chip, the 13-inch one, I would imagine that one would have beat this MacBook Pro, but again, by not that much, because it does have a fan, and a fan would help with rendering. But in terms of like overall Final Cut performance, when you're actually editing a video, I doubt it would be that noticeable. Okay, you may not be able to notice, but a day has passed since I was just recording the Final Cut performance, but I decided to put on the same shirt to keep up the illusion. Did I fool ya? Okay, we are moving on to Davinci Resolve. Davinci Resolve is designed to work on the M1 Macs as well as the Intel Macs natively. Now I am using a beta of Davinci Resolve because that's the only one that works on the M1 Macs, but I'm gonna use it on both of these so it's a fair competition. Okay, we're gonna start off with the Pro, and I'm just gonna add some footage. So I'm just gonna do in and out points, in, out, drag it down, do this one, in, out, drag it down, do this one, in, out, drag it down, let's do one more, in, out, and drag it down, and I'll just do like a Let's do like a scrubbing test. So if I double click on this one and I scrub, it's a little hitchy, but it's not bad. It's definitely workable. Okie doke, moving on to the Air. Let's just add some footage in, out, drag, do this one in, out, drag, in, and see, oh, that's interesting right there. Now I exited it out, but that is the first time I've seen that error. I have messed with Davinci Resolve a good bit, so hopefully that won't be a problem with this test. But we'll see. I'll just keep moving forward. So I added one more clip into this, and let's just do a scrubbing test here. And to be honest, it's about the same. I'm not noticing that much of a difference between the smoothness for the scrubbing. Moving back to the Pro, let's try some actual just color grading to see how that performs. So we'll color grade this image right here. So I have my scopes over here. I applied this Vlog to 709 LUT that is baked into Davinci Resolve. So let's just kind of play around and drop the shadows, raise the highlights some, and we'll adjust the midtones a little bit. Let's do a nice little curve. So again, I'm just gonna do that S-curve that I love so much because it's a nice little contrasty pop. Looks really good, and I'm just gonna, yeah, performs pretty well. Okay, moving on to the Air, try some color grading. Move over there, and I got the scopes here. Let's do this. I'm going to drop the shadows some. I'm gonna raise the highlights some. One thing I'm noticing immediately is the viewer is a ton smaller. Now I can move some things around, but that's just kind of what you run into when you have a smaller screen. But let's also throw in a nice little curve. So yeah, just give it that nice contrasty punch, and that looks good. And I didn't even apply a LUT, but that does look good. Here, let's just blow a LUT after the fact. It looks solid. That looks good. Well, actually, I did kind of blow it out a little bit. Let me bring down the highlights a little bit, and we'll bring up the midtones, and it looks solid. It performed really well. Okay, now let's do a 5-minute export. Again, this is 4K footage, 60 frames per second, shot on my GH5. It's not the exact same timeline as Final Cut, and it's not the exact same time it's gonna be used in Premiere in a little bit, but it's using the same type of footage, so it should be basically the same. Okay, moved over to the editing pane to just kind of scan through the timeline and see how it performs. So just watch that layer on this side. And yeah, it could be better, but it's not terrible. Let's try doing some zooming in and zooming out. That's a bit laggy, but again, not terrible. But if you just play it straight up, oof, that could be better. That's looking a little bit rough. Definitely dropping some frames. Now in the Air, again, exact same timeline. This also has a LUT and color grade across all of this footage. So we're seeing it all together, and that feels smoother. The scrolling is a lot smoother. Let's do the zoom in, zoom out. Also feels smoother. And let me see if I can find something where I'm moving. I don't think it's dropping frames. I think that actually looks pretty good. So that right there is performing quite a bit better. Okay, I did a little bit of research and I figured out why I was having that memory issue. At least I think I did. The hard drive on the MacBook Air was almost full, so that's why I wasn't getting the issue before, but I was now. So I deleted some stuff, and now things are working much better. So I guess what happens on the MacBook Air is, even though it has 8 gigs of RAM, I'm assuming it's using the hard drive to cache some of the storage as well. It does have a really fast hard drive, so not a bad move. Okay, let's see which of these can render out this 5-minute timeline quicker. Let's go in 3, 2, 1, and go. Okay, just a few seconds in, and right here you're seeing it's estimating this one will be done. The Pro will be done 7.5 minutes. The Air will be done about 5 minutes and 45 seconds. So right there, the Air has a slight lead. And the race has tightened quite a bit. This is at 32% with the Pro, 36%, and now the time is about a 30-second difference in terms of the estimation. Okay, and the MacBook Air is pulling away a little bit. It's about 6% in the lead, but still a pretty close race. And the MacBook Air is done And the MacBook Pro still has a little more to go. Okay, and they are both done. If you're expecting the Air to blow away the Pro, well, again, it just didn't. The Pro took 6 minutes and 52 seconds, whereas the Air took 6 minutes and 28 seconds. A 27-second difference. I'd call that a pretty minor win, but that does have me wondering. I'm wondering if the reason why the Pro actually got done with a Final Cut render quicker than the Air was because I had the hard drive full in the Air. So let me retest that real quick. Okay, first let's just try scanning through the timeline and seeing if I notice any real difference. Both of them are really responsive. I'd maybe say the Air was a touch more responsive, but both of them are handling the job quite well. Okay, we are a minute in and I'm basically seeing the same result. The Pro is a few percent in the lead at this point, about 3%. And the results were the same. The Pro won by a decent margin, but let's move on to Pixelmator Pro for some image editing. And actually what I use it for is thumbnail creation. So let's see how each perform. Okay, first off, let's try a zoom test on the Pro. So it feels pretty good, it's pretty snappy. Let's just try resizing my face over here. So again, feels pretty snappy. It lets me move it. Let's just make it humongo. Yes, there you go. Now that's a thumbnail right here. Now I do thumbnails at 720p, so it's 1280 by 720, because that's the standard thumbnail size, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so far so good. Now moving over to the Air, let's do a zoom test. Again, pretty responsive. I would say maybe it feels a little more snappy, but again, pretty mild. And now let's just resize my face. And again, pretty responsive. Let's just make my face huge, just see what happens. And yep, again, both very responsive. Okay, now back to the Pro, and I'm just gonna play with the color settings. Pretty responsive. Let's mess with the saturation. Vibrance, yes, I like the alien look. Let's make sure I'm overexposed, because that's what people like these days. And yeah, looking good. I definitely look very alien-like I'm getting sucked up into an alien spaceship. I don't know. This is woof. But it's responsive nonetheless. Okay, let's try the same thing over here. Oh, I look nice and warm. Now I'm going for the pink. Oh yeah, I like that alien look. Yes, extra saturation. Let's do a lower exposure this time. Now I got a Hulk-like look to me. Yes, very good, very good. Very snappy, and both, I think, perform about equally. Okay, I backed out all the amazing changes to my face. Now I'm going to do ML Enhance, which is actually using machine learning. In theory, the MacBook Air should be quicker because it actually has part of the chip actually includes something that should help with machine learning, which I think is a 16-core neural processor. So let's click in 3, 2, 1, and the Air is done. And then now the Pro. So the Air, I would say, was at least twice as fast. And it looks like they made similar decisions, not exactly the same, but in results pretty similar. Now they both went for like a yellowing kind of tone to my face, and again, pretty similar. Okay, now back to the Pro. So I'm just gonna get weird with it for a little bit, just to see if I can get it to just kind of hiccup at all, and so far, not so good. Okay, I'm actually gonna warp the image now, and that's just butter. That's really good. Oh yeah, and not only does it feel good doing this, it looks amazing. Yes, that, my friends, is a thumbnail. Let's get a nice long finger. There you go. That's really good. Now for the Air, let's go a different direction. Yes, very good. Tiny finger. Wow. That's fantastic. And yeah, let's warp it. I need some extra shoulders. There you go. I will say I think the Air feels just slightly more responsive. But again, both pretty equal here. I don't really think that one really shines over the other. Okay, now I've opened up an image in Pixelmator Pro that is just massive. This is a 42 megapixel image shot on a Sony a7R III. So the big image, let's try to do the same warping mechanics and see if we get a difference, because so far I'm not seeing much of a difference other than the machine learning test. Okay, let's try warping. Okay. Wow, still impressive, but I did see a little bit of lag at one point, but not bad at all. That's really interesting. I did not expect that. I thought it would at least show a little lag here and there. We'll do the same image on Photoshop to see if it makes that much of a difference. Okay, now I'm gonna do a much bigger brush size and let's do a little twirl. And yeah, wow, it's smooth. That is real nice. Okay, that's butter. That's really, really good. I can definitely tell that the Air is faster. It's not remarkably faster. It's not gonna necessarily change your life faster, but it's pretty amazing how easily it is manipulating this 42 megapixel image. Just to give you an idea, that is 7,952 by 5,304. There's a lot of pixels that it's manipulating. To keep things fair, I raised up the brush size and did twirl again. Butter. That is fantastic. Much bigger brush now. And again, just butter. I can clearly tell that the Air is handling it better than the Pro. Again, the Pro is still great, but that was fantastic. Now these last two are going to be Adobe. Now Adobe does not actually have anything really ready yet for the M1 Macbook Airs. I think I did hear they have a beta Photoshop ready, but we're going to use the real Photoshop and Premiere, and we'll see how those perform when it's being emulated to work on the M1 Mac versus the MacBook Pro. Okay, I have Photoshop here open with the 42 megapixel images. Let's try manipulating them. Okay, on the Pro again, let's try doing a zoom test. So I'm just gonna pinch and zoom. That could be more responsive. It's a little behind my fingers. Okay, now on the Air, let's do a zoom test, and it feels a little better. Still, you know, could be better though. Okay, back to the Pro. Let's just try messing with the colors some. So I'm just gonna adjust the exposure some. I'll bring down the shadows just a smidge, bring up the highlights. Looks already looking more vibrant, and that looks pretty good. Now let's try changing the hue and saturation some. So first I'm just gonna do something nuts. So just to see right there, you can see how the arrow is not exactly staying with me. If I go slower, obviously it can stay better. But let's do some more realistic. So I want it more orange. So that looks good to me. Not terrible performance. You know, could be better, but not bad. Let's go to the Air and let's try to do the exact same thing. I'm going to first mess with the levels. I'm gonna bring down the shadows just a smidge. I'm gonna bring up the highlights. And then I'm gonna bring out the midtones a little bit. Looks good. Now let's also try the hue and saturation again and see how well it sticks with it. That's definitely faster. Again, it is delayed, but not nearly as much as the MacBook Pro. But let's go for the orange and looking good. Okay, back to the Pro. So far the Air is winning, I would say, but again, it's not super noticeable, but it is something. Let's try manipulating the image a little bit more. So I'm gonna try the smudge tool in Adobe. And believe it or not, I actually did smudge it. I'm not sure, let's see. Yep, there is the peach ball of death. Oof. Compare that to Pixelmator Pro. Pixelmator Pro was clutch on this, and this is, I could see it smudging it some, but man. Oh my, it is still going. Ouch. Okay. It's done. Wow, that took a minute. Okay, that was maybe not quite a minute, but that was too much. Okay, back to the Air, same tool, same size. I'm gonna try to do basically the same movement. And again, I'm getting a beach ball. Okay, did it, but it didn't do quite as, nope, no, wait, nope, still beach balling. Is it done? I guess it's done, but it didn't do as much, so let me just pull it more. And I did it. Okay, now it's responding. Responding, responding, responding. Wow. Yikes. Even with that extra power. I did do it quicker though. That was definitely faster, at least I think it was. I would say of the two, this Air definitely went a little quicker in terms of manipulating that, but still neither was nearly as smooth as Pixelmator Pro. So if you need to make your images look ridiculous, I think Pixelmator Pro is the way to go. Okay, I reverted the images, but I thought of one more test I want to try. Let's just try resizing this image. Again, it's a huge image. It does that just fine on the Pro, does that just fine as well. And I don't know if there was a real winner there. Maybe the Air is a little smoother, but pretty close both ways. Okay, the final test, let's talk about Premiere. Now, I'm not personally a fan of Premiere. That's one reason why I use a Mac, because I really like Final Cut. I just think it works very fluidly, and I like the performance. But let's see how this does emulating Premiere versus on the MacBook Pro, where it's actually designed to use Premiere straight out of the box. Okay, we're gonna do the same basic test. We're on the Pro, and okay, it's scrubbing. Not bad at all. And again, these are the same footage I was using for the other tests, so 4K 60 footage, driving that into the timeline. Let's do this one. In, out, pulling that one into the timeline. And then let's do this one now. And we'll do in, out, and then also pulling that into the timeline. Nope, there it goes. Now it's pulled into the timeline. Switching over to the Air, and yeah, I think that feels smoother. Let's again do in, out, drag the timeline. Let's do another clip. Do in, out, drag the timeline. And then let's do this one. In, out. Oh, there it is. In, out, and drag to also the timeline. Okay, let's do some color grading. I have the scopes opened up right there. I have my Garberville LUT applied. And so moving the exposure some. Let's raise up the contrast some. Let's do a nice little curve. Let's see what happens. And if I, oh yeah, look how behind the curve is. But it's workable, but it is definitely not really with it. So the actual curve's not super great, but let's try the shadows. And if you look at that, like, again, it's lagging a little bit behind, but it's not terrible. Meaning versus Davinci Resolve as well as Final Cut. Now I'm going to move over to the Air. Let's add the Garberville LUT. And it's added. Ooh, I would say that's even better. Oh, almost forgot to open up scopes. Yeah, I would definitely say that's better, I think. Let's see, let me keep trying. Doing that, and then let's do the curve. Let's see how much the curve is behind. I'm still not quite there with it, but maybe a hair better. Tough to say, though. But yeah, I mean, it's not running terribly. Like, my last experience with Premiere was not good, to say the least. But it's running okay on both machines, I would say. Okay, I have another 5-minute project. Again, same footage, color graded, has LUTs. Let's see how these perform with an actual full project. So first on the Pro, let's try just zooming in on the timeline, and that's not bad at all. So now I'm gonna try to scan through the timeline, and that could definitely be better, no joke. Not unusable, but not great either. But if I hit play, it plays back just fine. Okay, moving over to the Air, let me do a zoom test first, and that I think feels a touch better. That's pretty good right there. Now let me try just scanning through the timeline. Again, I think that seems more responsive to me. Yeah, that's pretty good. And if I hit play, it takes a second, but it's playing, and I don't think it's dropping any frames. It looks pretty good to me. Okay, and now for the export test. 3, 2, 1, and go. Okay, we are now 2 minutes in, and the Air is crushing it. It's at 20%, 21% now, and the Pro is sitting at 12%, and it looks like it's just going to absolutely crush the Pro. It's really interesting that the first video editing program that looks like it's going to crush it is one that's actually not made to work on the MacBook Air. So, a little weird. Okay, and the MacBook Air has crossed the 50% mark. It is now at 56%. The MacBook Pro, 31%. Ouch. Okay, the MacBook Air is almost done, 99%. And it is done at about 10 minutes and 30 seconds. And the Pro is sitting at about 55%. So it's going to be a minute. And it looks like the Pro is now done. Is it done? Is it done? Is it done? Is it done? And it's done at 19 minutes and about 44 seconds. That's about a 9-minute difference. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was super helpful and you found it, helpful, I guess. I already said that. I did post a video the day before. In fact, that's why I'm posting this video, explaining why I'm returning the new M1 MacBook Air. And basically looking at the results that you just saw, I made that decision, and you can watch that video right there. But I go into a lot of other reasons why it makes sense to return the MacBook Air, and also go into some reasons why you might still want to buy it anyway. There's a lot of things I really loved about the MacBook Air that I don't talk about in this particular video. So again, you can check it out right there. Thanks for watching. If you like polished video reviews and just opinion pieces, you can always subscribe and enable notifications. I'm Titus, by the way. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.